There really isn't anything that I can fault with these wagons. It's another ace in the hole for Accurascale. Hi there everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back up here into the loft on Weir Yard. And today I'm really grateful to Accurascale for sending over a set of their new KUA nuclear flask wagons for the full review treatment. Now I've had them running here on Weir Yard all day, and I've been giving them a really good prod and a poke, and I'm going to share with you my findings. But before we do that, don't forget that the Monday Club Accurascale MDV wagon is still available. This is a fully detailed wagon with a prototypical livery to which embellishments of Return to Weir Yard branding have been applied on both sides, plus the JK logo in graffiti form on one side. It's the perfect addition to your fleet, especially as the main range Accurascale MDV wagon packs in the tops liveries are now starting to sell out. So this is a great opportunity to bag yourself one of these fine wagons. We've got a link to these in the description box down below, and also don't forget we've got an affiliate link for Rails of Sheffield for the Accurascale KUA wagon that we're reviewing today. So back to that, let's take a look at what I found. Ever since Accurascale burst on the scene with their range of wagons, the model world has been wowed. And I've been very lucky and very thankful of Accurascale that I've been given the opportunity to review almost all of their releases. This KUA nuclear flask wagon is the latest from Accurascale, and I'd like to extend a big thank you to Accurascale for sending over this particular twin wagon pack of those wagons. It's been hugely anticipated by modelers, and I've got here KU001A, the KUA nuclear flask wagon, and this is wagon numbers 95770 and 95771. Now, these wagons were built in the 1990s for nuclear fuel going to and from places like Devonport, Dockyard and Rosyth for the nuclear submarine fleet. They give an ideal opportunity for the more modern image modeler to run prototypically quite short freight trains to and from the Dockyards and Sellafield nuclear fuel reprocessing plant. The box itself, I really like this. It's got a magnetic flap that just sort of clicks in place, but then it opens up, and inside we have this lovely presentation of the two wagons in the box. And this actually, I know a lot of people poke fun about YouTubers who get obsessed by boxes, but you have to agree that presented like this says it is something special. This is an announcement to the world that Accurascale are rightly proud of their products and want to put them in a packaging that reflects that. It's the same difference between buying a Fiat Panda car and a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. They both ostensibly do the same thing. They get you from A to B in a box, and if you're lucky there's a stereo that works in both of them. They've got four wheels. But I think nobody would be in any doubt that the Rolls-Royce was the better of the two in terms of quality. And it's that same air of quality that's been brought to the packaging of the Accurascale wagons, and it says that this company is very proud of what they've produced, and so much so that they're prepared to put them in a really great presentation box. They come with a little data sheet here with a brief history of the wagons, with a length of over 80 feet, weighing in at more than 150 tons. Two nuclear flask wagons were built to this code by Bombardier and ProRail in Wakefield in 1998, so very late 1990s. initially right at the beginning of the privatisation period, given the TOPS code KUA, and primarily tasked with carrying spent nuclear fuel to the reprocessing facility at Sellafield from the Royal Navy's submarine bases at Devonport and Rosyth. They've also been used to convey nuclear materials to Sellafield from the nuclear testing facility at Dounreay in the far north of Scotland, and in the course of their work the wagons can appear at locations as diverse as Carlisle, Crewe, Exeter, Georgemas Junction, Inverness, Moss End, Washwood Heath and Wembley Yard. They also make periodic trips to Eastleigh for servicing, so very, very wide roaming. Now there's also some information here about what else would run with them. Of course, because they're carrying nuclear material, there's going to be heightened security. So Royal Marines or specially trained army units, which is tasked with guarding the cargo, would go with them in some Mark II escort coaches. And loaded trains feature at least 2 DRS locomotives for redundancy. So basically, if a locomotive breaks down or develops a fault, they can still keep going. On the other side, we've got the exploded diagram of parts and some just some information about Accurascale, the product and its construction. So I'm going to just now lift this out of the box, and it comes in a 2-part blister, which just has like these poppers that secure them together. So I'm just going to take off the top layer, and I'm going to leave these in the box and just lift both of the wagons out, and they are actually quite huge. They remind me a little bit of the Oxford railgun in terms of their size. They're certainly a lot bigger than any other wagon that I've seen from any other manufacturer in recent times, certainly for the UK scene. I think perhaps if you go back far enough, Lima did do a torpedo wagon which was similarly quite big, but that I haven't seen them about for actually a number of decades. Getting them both out, what is outwardly immediately apparent is the wealth of detail in terms of the actual chassis of these wagons. They feature quite an interesting bogie design because they have quite a lot of shielding in them for that nuclear material. I'm guessing that there's quite a lot of lead in the real wagons. It does need a lot of axles to carry that weight and spread it out over a larger area. I'm guessing that some of the facilities that they're going to as well, they've got some quite tight curves, so there's a lot of restrictions on the design of the real wagons, which they have overcome through this particular design. So what we can see here is that the wagon incorporates the bogies within a secondary bogie, which then fits to the actual chassis of the wagon itself at both ends. And this helps it negotiate point work and some quite tight corners considering how big this wagon is. The weight of the model wagon is also really, really high, and I'm sure that these will run incredibly well when we get them going around Weir Yard. I'm also going to see how well they perform on some of the tighter corners with the limited restrictions. I'm not expecting them to get all the way around, but certainly it will give us an indication of just how well these are able to follow poorly laid, uneven laid track. Out of the box, we also get some other inserts here, and these are just to stop these very, very delicate handrails from being crushed together. So I'm just going to take these out so we can get the full effect. So if you're worried about trying to get these out and possibly damaging stuff, just get yourself a little screwdriver and use that to lever the foam out. We've also got some more foam here and at the corresponding end there. And what all of this, once removed, reveals is some incredibly fine handrails on these walkways on the bogies. And these have been incredibly well done. They feel like they're etched metal, painted up in the white, and they are actually much more resilient than the presence of the foam might lead you to believe. What it does lead the eye to is this incredible detail there in the secondary bogie design, and you can see we've got underneath the walkway a whole host of pipework, And it's not all just finished in blue. We've got the fittings picked out in red and yellow. And then we've also got some of the warning flashes as well. The bogies too are not neglected. We've got some really quite fine mouldings on these, and the brake shoes do actually line up with where the wheel treads would be if you're running with EM or P4. And looking at these, the actual axle boxes are wide enough apart that if you wanted to pull these wheels outwards to re-gauge this for EM or P4, there is ample room to do that, and the brake blocks should then fully line up with the wheel treads. And it really is great to see this accommodation for people who model alternative gauges. The fine detail doesn't just end there. We've got some really neat and tidy handrails and laddering underneath there, and then we've got these square form factor buffers, and they are completely sprung, and that's actually quite a pleasing mechanism in there. The couplings themselves, slimline tension locks in NEM pockets that are mounted to the outer of the bogies. These can be pulled out and replaced with KDs if you so choose. Looking further back, and I can feel that there's a lot of weight. This chassis is cast metal. It is really quite substantial. We've got that substantial steel beam look of the originals captured perfectly with this plate, with the ribbing. But these here, with the lifting eyes, they are separately attached, what appear to be metal details, but they are really nicely done, picked out in yellow. There's no bleed over of that, and we've also got a whole host of different lettering in there as well. It is actually incredible. These wagons do reward careful inspection. So we've got there on the main chassis there, Moda 95771 KUA. The anchor, which I think is to do with it can travel on ferries, and there's an actual strapping down point there. The nuclear warning lozenge, and a whole host of other information. There really is a lot going on this wagon. The actual bodywork there is really nicely done. Again, it feels, yeah, it's well on there. These do look potentially as being a plastic moulding, but you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between where the plastic ends and the metal begins, because the paint finish on these is exceptionally well done. But if you squeeze in both ends of this, and this isn't intended to be removed, but what I want to do is, I don't normally dismantle these things, but I'm just going to pull that off, and this is a plastic piece. But what it does show is the full construction of the wagon, and the model follows the prototypical construction. So you've got this very strong beam with the well in the middle to keep it within gauge, and then up and again over the bogies. So effectively this is an extremely heavy duty bogie well wagon, but certainly with the extra sets of bogies and the thickness of these beams, this really very much is capable of carrying a lot more weight. And given what these are used for, I'm guessing that there is a lot of redundancy in terms of the structure, because you really don't want to run into any kind of problems. Putting this back in place is actually really easy. It just slots in. But what I did notice is that even though this bit and this bit are completely covered by this, the model does still have that full design of the beam in place. So it's that kind of attention to detail that always impresses me with a Curoscale. Looking to the other end of the wagon again, we've got the handbrake wheels on those bogies, and all of the detail, again, even on the bogies, is picked out. Really incredibly nicely done. Looking underneath there, we've got this kind of two-level effect with this solid steel beam, which does appear to be cast metal. And then we've got those spaces in there, and we've actually got an air gap all the way through. Again, really quite robust, these handrails. I'm just sort of really giving them quite a push and a prod. These ones on the end, really nicely well fitted. And I know that I've handled a lot of stuff over the years, where you do have to treat some of the finer handrails with a lot of respect because they do tend to fall off very easily, but there's none of that here with this model. That buffer there is just a little bit twisted, but just pull that into shape, that's absolutely fine. Again, sprung buffers, slimline couplings there on the bogies. It really is nicely done. Turned metal wheels, flat faced disc, no holes, no spokes. And the bogies are assembled using just simple screws. So actually, it'd be quite simple to take this apart if you needed to for whatever reason. Looking to the other wagon, again, we've got exactly the same construction, but the lettering on these, I'm just going to remove these foam pads. Really easy to do. There's no worry actually about damaging these because it is really, really robustly constructed. I suspect that these are more about rough handling in transit rather than with the end user. This wagon features very, very minor detail differences from the other, obviously different running number, but really, really nicely done. I'm just looking there. If you just compare the two panels there, they are very different. Let me just turn that over. Yeah, all of the lettering incorporates all of the subtle detail differences between the two prototype wagons. And of course, even though they came out of the same factory in the same paint scheme, there's always going to be those minor detail differences, and they have been captured perfectly by Accurascale. I'm going to turn now to the scores, and first up is build quality, and actually I've been incredibly impressed with these. Again, I'd like to thank Accurascale for sending over these samples for review because it does give me the opportunity to handle these far harder than I would dare with a model that I had bought myself for fear of damaging it. And actually these have come through completely unscathed. The quality of the build is really good, heavy duty, but not at the compromising of the detail. One of the areas that I really do particularly like is in here. All of these different little pipes, again, separately applied, but very, very robust. And it really does just impress me. But that detail doesn't come at the expense of fragility, and it has handling really, really well. So in the absence of any problems whatsoever, these wagons can only get a 10 out of 10. Next up is running quality. And what is actually really, really good is that the weight of these wagons means that they follow the track, including through imperfections, incredibly well. The bogie design with the secondary bogie design that accurately follows what the prototype has does mean that these wagons follow the track really, really gracefully. Overhang is minimized, which does mean it'll get round tighter curves than you might initially imagine from the overall length of the wagon. And there's no real risk of the couplings getting pulled apart because this double bogie design means that that coupling does ride exactly where it needs to be at all times. The wheels are really smooth running, and the rolling resistance, despite the weight, doesn't seem to be unnecessarily high, so it doesn't tax any of the locomotives I have tried pulling this with. The only area where it did seem to struggle was grounding out on gradient changes and on extreme corners, where this low-slung girder did tend to ground on some of the ballast shoulders that I have, but I think that is probably more a statement on wear yard than on these models, so I'm going to give these a 9.8. Next up is DCC fitting and innovation. Well, there's no DCC fitting needed nor required on these models, but on innovation, Accurascale really have pushed the limits. The design of these bogies really does work well. I can imagine 20 or 30 years ago we would have had a kind of fudge to make this work, but there's no compromise with the Accurascale, and you can see there is all the detail that should be on this wagon. It really is without compromise, and perhaps that is something that really it accurately describes all of Accurascale's products, but none so this one, without compromise. These railings are a particular favourite of mine. Robust yet accurate. The choice of materials is incredible and the paint finish is really durable. There's no sign of this white paint trying to flake off, which is sometimes what you get when you have an etched piece of metal that gets flexed after it's been painted. This really is well done. The finish on the model as well, they really have pulled out all the stops to get all of this detail on here. So when it comes to innovation, I'm going to give this a 9.9. On accuracy and quality of finish, again, it's another ace in the hole for a Curoscale. There really isn't anything that I can fault with these wagons. These, again, are an indication that a Curoscale ups the bar every time. Each and every one of their wagons that I've reviewed, I have been incredibly impressed with. And each time I've thought, well, this has to be the peak. Where can they go from here? But these wagons, even though they are completely outside of the period that I model, I am incredibly impressed with every aspect of them. There's very little that I could fault with these, and I feel like I'm looking for faults when I'm poking and prodding these. And really, perhaps, I should just be incredibly happy that this unusual wagon has been brought to the market with such finesse and fidelity. I thought long and hard on this, looking desperately for something to take some marks off, because people would probably say something, probably will say something, when they look at the scores and go, you're only doing that because they sent you a review sample. But honestly, looking incredibly closely at these, and I have the luxury that I can give these as much rough handling as I choose because they're review samples, I really can't find anything to detract from it. So I'm going to give this another 10 out of 10. On value for money, on the face of it, these are expensive wagons. I've had a look around, and I've got an affiliate link down below that takes you to Rails of Sheffield, and I'm finding these wagons at just a shade under the £160 mark. That makes them £80 each, which on the face of it, I know a lot of people will perhaps balk a bit at the price. But just stop a moment and think about what you're getting for that. You're getting two incredible wagons made to an incredibly high standard, and actually at that price I think you're still getting a bargain. There really is no expense spared, not just on the wagons but on the presentation in that lovely box. These are presented in such a way that you really do feel like you're getting value for money, so I'm going to give these a 9.2 out of 10. And that brings us to a final score of an incredible 48.9 out of 50. It really is almost embarrassing how much I love these wagons. It's not my era. I don't do post-privatisation. I barely do sectorisation. But these wagons are a head-turner. And if you model post-1998, then these wagons very much are a must. They won't look out of place on any layout set after that period, because they were so wide-reaching up and down the country. And you won't be disappointed. The quality of these models is there. These very much are the Maserati of the model world, with almost nothing to fault, and with that lovely presentation box that just oozes quality. This really is an all-round excellent release from a Curoscale, and I absolutely look forward to whatever their next release will be. Well, I hope you found that video informative, and actually I think it's starting to reach a point with products that are coming forward from model manufacturers that actually scoring them is on a bit of a hiding to nothing. Now, I know I've been criticised for what people have said being far too generous to so many models, but quite frankly, if there's nothing outwardly really wrong with a model, then I think it's disingenuous to be taking marks off just for the sake of it. And a lot of the models that are coming through now, I'm finding actually that within the limits of current technology, they are exceptionally good, and my scorings always reflect this. So that's why a lot of these items do score very, very highly. But actually, I think I'm going to do away with scores altogether in the future, because I think that it's not really practical anymore to be scoring a lot of these items, because quite frankly, models are getting so good. Yes, I know we'll look back in 10 years and think that models of today were not as good as the ones that we will have then. But that's through technological advances, and those models are not practical to make now. So what we're getting is the very best of what is possible to make now, and my scores reflect this. Don't forget to tickle that like button, share this video too, and subscribe to the channel. And also check us out over on Patreon if you want to support the channel to keep making the videos that you want to see. And of course, a big thank you to Accurascale for sending over today's models for review. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Graham Foster, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, and NI Railways 4000 class. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.